I never thought I'd reach 73 and still feel like I was just beginning. Most people my age sit back, satisfied that the chapters of their life have been written, their lessons learned, not me. I spent 52 years chasing shadows, convincing myself that I had time, that I knew enough, that I could fix everything tomorrow. And yet, here I am finally understanding what it truly means to live, to really live, before the hourglass runs dry. It started as it always does, with a small, almost invisible regret. I remember sitting in my study, the late afternoon sun painting the room gold, and realizing how many mornings I had wasted on things that mattered so little. The emails, the meetings, the arguments over things that, in the grand scheme, were meaningless. My wife, God bless her soul, used to tell me, "You're missing life while you're busy protecting it." I thought she was just nagging. I didn't listen, not then. When you spend half a century making the wrong choices, you get very good at excuses. I told myself I was working for the future, saving for stability, planning for success. But what I was really doing was avoiding the discomfort of being honest, with myself and with everyone around me. I avoided difficult conversations, avoided telling people what I felt, avoided taking chances that might have led to failure. Or worse, vulnerability. I had built a life that looked perfect on the surface, a life that others envied, but inside I was hollow, a man whose most valuable moments had been measured in lost opportunities. And then, one day, it all came crashing down in a way I could never have prepared for. My daughter, who had been my pride, my tether to hope, she told me something that cut deeper than anything I had ever known. She was leaving, not because she wanted to, but because she felt she had no choice. I had spent decades buried in routines and responsibilities, thinking I was providing a secure foundation for my family, yet I had forgotten the one thing that mattered more than stability: presence. I had missed birthdays, first recitals, quiet talks in the kitchen. I had left her to learn things on her own, lessons I thought I would teach her later. Later never came. I remember the night she left. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I sat in my armchair, holding a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, and I realized how utterly alone I felt. Not alone in the sense of lacking company, but alone in the realization that life had been passing me by, while I was busy trying to master it. I had read every book, followed every strategy, consulted every expert, but no amount of planning could teach me the one lesson I had ignored for 52 years. The present moment is the only thing that truly exists. The next morning I took a walk in the park, the chill of winter biting at my cheeks, and I watched people going about their lives. Young couples holding hands, children chasing after frisbees, old men feeding pigeons. Each one of them moving through a rhythm I had once taken for granted, a rhythm I had assumed I had all the time in the world to master, and in that moment something inside me shifted. The years I had spent accumulating knowledge and wealth, the careful construction of a life that looked right, it all seemed insignificant compared to the simple act of noticing, of being present. It was a revelation that came quietly, almost stealthily, like a shadow slipping across the floor. I realized that the people we love, the moments we treasure, they cannot be scheduled, perfected, or postponed. They are fleeting, fragile, and when they are gone, no amount of money, success, or cleverness can bring them back. I had squandered decades thinking that security and preparation were the essence of life, when in reality, life itself had been waiting patiently for me to show up. The lessons hit me one after another, relentless and unyielding. I learned that apologies are worthless if they are delayed, that hugs are more important than handshakes, that listening, truly listening, is more valuable than speaking, that the quiet, unremarkable moments, sitting in the sun, sharing a cup of tea, walking down a tree-lined street, are what compose the symphony of a meaningful life. I had spent 2 years ignoring the music, convinced that the crescendo lay in some distant, grand event. But the crescendo had been playing quietly all along, right in front of me, and then there was regret. Oh, the weight of it! Regret is a terrible teacher, but it is effective. I regretted every birthday I didn't attend, every apology I didn't offer, every risk I didn't take out of fear or pride. I regretted the words I never said, the dreams I postponed, the adventures I avoided. Yet in the same breath, I understood something miraculous. Regret is only dangerous if it immobilizes you. If it inspires action instead, it becomes a guide, a map showing exactly where your attention is needed. That day, I decided to stop wasting time, to stop postponing life, to stop hiding behind the illusion of control. So I began, in small ways at first. I called my daughter, not with words of explanation, but with words of presence. I didn't lecture, I didn't justify. I listened, I laughed, I cried. I promised nothing but my time, my attention, my willingness to truly be there, and the relief, the joy, the unexpected connection. It was intoxicating. I realized that it was never too late to learn, to forgive, to love. It was only too late if I chose to ignore the lesson entirely. I also began to notice the smaller lessons, those that life whispers rather than shouts. A neighbor struggling with groceries, a friend I hadn't spoken to in years, a stranger smiling on the street. I began to understand that life's meaning is not found in grand achievements or accolades, but in connection, empathy, and the courage to engage fully with the world. 52 years had been a long teacher, but at 73, I finally started paying attention, and that is what I want to leave you with. Life is not a rehearsal. There is no perfect timing, no ideal conditions. You do not get a second chance at the moments you let slip through your fingers. The lesson I spent 52 years learning is simple yet profound. Show up, be present, speak your truths, love fully. Regret will come, certainly, but let it guide you rather than paralyze you. Because when the sun sets, when the days are gone, the only thing you will truly remember is the way you spent your time and the people you shared it with. Everything else, success, money, fear, perfection, fades into nothing, and that, finally, is what I have learned. The first challenge appeared in the form of my sister, Margaret. She had always been the practical one, the one who reminded me of obligations, deadlines, and responsibilities I often ignored. For years, we had been polite strangers under the same roof, speaking in clipped sentences, avoiding the awkward truths that festered between us. I had assumed she understood, that she knew I cared, but love, I was learning, cannot survive on assumption. One gray afternoon I called her. My hands trembled more than I expected. It had been years since we had a real conversation. Her voice on the other end was cool, measured, unforgiving in the way only someone who has felt neglected can be. "I wasn't sure you'd call," she said, and I could hear both relief and suspicion mingling in her tone. "I needed to," I said. "I've been thinking, reflecting, and I realize I've been absent in too many ways for too long." There was a pause. Then she sighed, a sound that carried decades of disappointment. "You think words can fix this?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't expect them to, but I want to try." That was all I could offer, presence, honesty, and a willingness to confront the past. And that alone began to fracture the wall between us. The conversation stretched into hours. We spoke of childhood grievances, of mistakes unspoken, of moments I had failed to notice. I didn't defend myself. I simply listened, letting her pain unfold without interruption. And in listening, I discovered a strange, painful liberation. Acknowledging failure was heavier than pretending perfection, but it was also the first step toward real connection. Later, I realized this was exactly what life had been trying to teach me for 52 years. Presence isn't a grand gesture. It's small, consistent, and often uncomfortable. It's sitting in the room with someone whose silence used to make you uneasy and simply being there. It's saying what you feel when fear tells you to stay silent. It's showing up even when it hurts. The next lesson arrived from an unexpected place. My old friend, Robert. We had shared a bond that once seemed unbreakable. Years of late-night talks, shared secrets, and mutual dreams. But somewhere along the way, time had drifted us apart. A minor misunderstanding, left unresolved, had become a chasm too wide to cross in our younger days. I had assumed it was too late to reconcile, that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. I was wrong. I found him at the local library, an ironic choice, perhaps, for two men who had once argued over the meaning of life in smoky bars and quiet kitchens. Seeing him again was like staring into a mirror of what I used to be, a younger, braver version of myself, reckless but unafraid to care. "It's been a while," he said cautiously. "It has," I replied. "Too long, I think." And then, slowly, carefully, we rebuilt what we had destroyed. No grand apologies, no false reassurances, just the acknowledgement that life had taken us in different directions, and that we could still meet in the middle. In that meeting, I understood another truth. Relationships, like life itself, are fragile. Neglect them, and they wither. Nourish them, and they flourish, even after decades of neglect. But the lessons weren't confined to personal relationships. Life has a way of teaching through circumstance, through the quiet cruelty of reality. I discovered this one morning when I received a call from my former business partner, Peter. The company we had built together, once our pride, had gone through a turbulent time after my semi-retirement. There were lawsuits, betrayals, and whispers of mismanagement. I had thought I could step away from responsibility, but life doesn't allow such luxuries. I flew across the country, confronting the mess I had ignored for years. It was painful, humiliating, and exhausting, but necessary. I realized then that responsibility is not a thing to be postponed. It is the backbone of life, the invisible thread that ties our actions to their consequences. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It only makes the reckoning sharper when it finally arrives. By the time I returned home, I was exhausted in a way I hadn't been in decades, but I was also alive. Alive in the way that only confrontation with truth, with regret, and with fear can make a person feel. I understood now that life's lessons are never gentle. They arrive in force, uninvited, and demand attention. And if you ignore them long enough, they will extract a toll far heavier than you ever imagined. The most profound lesson, though, came not from confrontation, reconciliation, or responsibility, but from reflection. One evening I found myself sitting on my porch, the sun sinking low, painting the sky in blood-red streaks. I held a cup of tea, inhaling the crisp winter air, and I thought about all the years I had wasted in fear, procrastination, and distraction. 52 years had passed, nearly a lifetime, and only now was I beginning to understand what truly mattered. I thought about the people I had lost, the moments I had missed, the laughter I had postponed, the conversations I had avoided. And yet, in that same breath, I realized that it was not too late, not yet. I could still reach out, still speak, still love, still be present. I could still take action, even if the world expected me to sit quietly in resignation. So I made a decision, a radical, terrifying, exhilarating decision. I would live as if these next years were my last, not in panic, but in purpose. I would reach out to every friend I had neglected. I would apologize where apologies were due, forgive where forgiveness was owed, and embrace every opportunity to connect, to give, to receive. I would let go of pride, fear, and the illusion of control, and simply show up in life, fully, as I had never done before. And in that commitment, I began to see a transformation. Old habits began to fall away, almost imperceptibly at first, then with increasing speed. I found myself laughing more freely, crying more openly, and cherishing the smallest moments with a newfound intensity. The lessons I had spent decades avoiding became a part of my daily life, woven into my actions, my thoughts, my interactions. I also began to understand that these lessons were not mine alone. They were universal. Every person who postpones truth, avoids discomfort, or clings to fear will one day face the reckoning of wasted time. And yet, the possibility of redemption, of transformation, remains for anyone willing to pay attention. Life, I realized, is merciful to those who choose to learn, even belatedly. By the time night fell, I was exhausted but exhilarated. The stars emerged, cold and distant, yet reassuring in their constancy. I felt small in their presence, yes, but I also felt connected. To the universe, to the people I loved, to the life I had long neglected. 52 years of wandering had taught me more than any book, lecture, or manual ever could. And I was ready to spend the rest of my years living, not surviving, connecting, not hiding, loving, not regretting. Because the truth, the simple, unflinching truth, is this: life is fleeting, fragile, and far too short to waste. You cannot rewind the clock, but you can start today. You can show up, speak your truths, embrace your fears, and cherish your moments. That is the only lesson worth learning. That is the only wisdom worth holding. And yet, even with all this newfound clarity, the hardest part remained, confronting the consequences of the 52 years I had spent ignoring life's true lessons. The bridges I had burned, the words I had left unsaid, the love I had postponed. They did not vanish simply because I finally understood. Learning the lesson is one thing, paying the cost is another entirely. And that cost, I was about to discover, would challenge everything I thought I knew about forgiveness, connection, and redemption. The mistake I had buried, the one I thought time had forgiven, had not disappeared. It lingered like smoke in a room, subtle at first, then insistent, choking. It was the argument I had with my father nearly 6 decades ago. I had stormed out, slammed the door, and swore I'd never speak to him again. Not for months, not for years, but forever. I was 19, foolish, convinced I knew everything about life, and certain my father was wrong. And yet here I was, 73, realizing that the unresolved anger, the unspoken apologies, and the silence I had imposed upon him had shaped me in ways I had never admitted. It had made me stubborn, fearful, and incapable of confronting the truths I now held dear. The irony was brutal. 52 years of wasted lessons, all stemming from one night of pride and pride alone. I decided it was time to finally face him, not the memory, not the regret, but him. I visited the cemetery where he rested, the ground cold beneath my feet, the sky gray as though the heavens themselves mourned the delay. My hand trembled on the gravestone as I traced his name, words I had long avoided speaking now choking my throat. "Father," I whispered, my voice faltered. "I am sorry. I wasted decades being angry when I should have learned from you. I wasted years thinking I knew better, when in truth I had so much to learn. Please forgive me." The wind stirred in the trees, a soft sigh that felt almost like an answer. And in that moment, I understood a profound truth. Forgiveness is not always a transaction between two people. Sometimes it is an act we perform for ourselves. The moment we release the anger, we allow life to move forward. We reclaim time, and in reclaiming time, we finally begin to live, but forgiveness was only the beginning. Life, as I had learned, does not pause while we make amends. There were others waiting, my daughter, my friends, even strangers whose paths I had crossed but failed to appreciate. Each encounter carried the weight of a lesson, a chance to finally act instead of postponing. And yet, with each action there was fear. Fear that I was too late, that the opportunity had passed, that my mistakes were irreparable. The first test came when I reached out to my daughter again. She was wary, cautious, and justifiably so. Our previous conversation had built a fragile bridge, but the emotional chasm remained. I had to show, not tell, that I was present now in a way I never had been. We spent hours walking through the park where she had spent her childhood, recounting stories I had long ignored, listening to memories I had never bothered to preserve. And in those hours I realized something extraordinary. Even decades of neglect could not erase the bond forged by love. But bonds are delicate. They require attention, patience, and humility. I was learning to be humble in ways I never imagined, acknowledging my failures without defensiveness, expressing emotion without fear, and truly listening without judgment. Then came the challenge of rebuilding friendships I had abandoned. Robert, my old friend, had returned to his usual jovial self, but he tested me in subtle ways. He would question my intentions, challenge my promises, and remind me that trust is not granted, it is earned. I learned to accept accountability in its rawest form. I learned that actions outweigh words, that consistency builds bridges faster than rhetoric, and that time, though relentless, is forgiving if met with sincerity. And yet, even as I rebuilt these connections, I encountered resistance from unexpected corners. Margaret, my sister, confronted me one evening with a blunt truth. You can try to fix the past, but some wounds don't heal as fast as you hope. Don't assume that apology alone is enough. Her words struck me like lightning. I had imagined that reconciliation would be a straight path, but life's emotional terrain is never linear. Healing is jagged, unpredictable, and demands courage every step of the way. So I persisted, not because I was sure of success, but because I was sure of necessity. To live fully, I had to confront every misstep, every omission, every act of negligence, even those I had buried beneath pride, shame, or indifference. And in that confrontation, I discovered a quiet joy, a fierce satisfaction that can only come from facing the truths you have long avoided. One afternoon, while reflecting on these lessons, I received an unexpected letter. It was from a former colleague, someone I had wronged decades ago in a business dispute. He had been furious at me, convinced I had acted out of selfishness. I had avoided him for years, fearful of confrontation and the possible fallout. And now, he wrote, he wanted to meet, to discuss, to reconcile if possible. I felt a familiar fear creep in the fear I had known my whole life, the fear that had kept me trapped in routines and excuses. But this time I didn't run, I didn't rationalize, I agreed to meet. The meeting was tense at first. Old wounds surfaced like lightning striking dry wood, sparking anger, regret, and shame. But as we talked, shared perspectives, and admitted failings, a transformation occurred. The man who had once been my adversary became my ally once again, bound not by contracts or convenience, but by the simple act of human understanding. It was a lesson I had long ignored. Conflict does not have to be permanent. Bridges, no matter how long burned, can be rebuilt with courage, honesty, and time. Through all this, I began documenting my journey, writing down lessons, reflections, and truths that had eluded me for decades. I wanted to capture the essence of what I had learned, not just for myself, but for anyone willing to listen. I realized that the most valuable legacy we leave is not wealth, not titles, not accolades, but wisdom shared, lessons passed down, and lives touched. And as I wrote, I felt a strange liberation, a sense of purpose I had never known. But life, as always, was not done testing me. One evening, a letter arrived that would shake the foundation of all I had rebuilt. It was from my ex-wife, someone I had once loved deeply and lost tragically due to my negligence and pride. She was dying. The news was sudden, cruel, and unavoidable. I had no time for explanations, for apologies, or for excuses. I had only the opportunity to act, to show up, and to embrace the lessons I had spent 2 years learning. Driving to her bedside, my mind raced through decades of mistakes, regrets, and lost chances. I thought of every moment I had postponed, every word I had left unsaid, and yet I felt a strange clarity. This was not punishment. This was life's final challenge, a chance to embody every lesson I had finally understood. To be present, to show love, to reconcile, to forgive. Everything else was secondary. When I reached her, frail and fading, I took her hand. I did not attempt to justify the past. I did not ask for forgiveness. I simply offered presence, honesty, and acknowledgement. Her eyes, once sharp and unyielding, softened. She smiled faintly, recognizing the effort, the change, the understanding that had taken me a lifetime to grasp. In that moment, I understood the final truth. Learning is incomplete without action. Reflection without execution is meaningless, and love, delayed though it may be, can still heal even the deepest wounds. The choice that awaited me was the culmination of 2 years of missed opportunities, hidden regrets, and postponed truths. It came quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a shadow moving across the floor of my life, yet it carried the weight of decades. My ex-wife, frail but conscious, had summoned me not for apologies, not for explanations, but for one last act of presence, a chance to show, finally, that I had learned. Sitting by her bedside, I held her hand, feeling the thinness of her skin, the rapid heartbeat that was a fragile reminder of mortality. I realized in that instant that life's ultimate test is not wealth, nor power, nor knowledge. It is presence. To truly live, you must be there when it matters most, even if fear, pride, and hesitation scream otherwise. And so I stayed, I listened, I shared memories old and forgotten, laughing softly at recollections we had long ignored. I cried without shame for the weight of years lost and the relief of finally showing up. The hospital room became a theater of reconciliation. Friends, family, and distant relatives trickled in, drawn by urgency and concern. Each visitor brought a story, a lesson, a truth I had not yet embraced. I apologized where apologies were owed, embraced where hugs had been deferred, and listened where silence had once been my shield. The air was thick with emotion, yet for the first time in decades I felt a profound clarity. Life, I realized, is a series of moments, and only those who show up fully can understand its depth. Over the next few days, as my ex-wife rested, I began taking action in ways I had long postponed. I reconciled with distant friends who had felt my absence as abandonment. I mended the strained relationship with Margaret, my sister, who slowly allowed the walls between us to crumble. I wrote letters to colleagues I had wronged, never expecting responses, but satisfied that I had attempted what so many avoid: acknowledgement, accountability, and courage. It was exhausting emotionally and physically, but invigorating. I had spent 2 years hiding behind excuses, routines, and pride, believing I had more time than I did. Now I understood that time is not a luxury. It is a privilege, fleeting and fragile, and its value cannot be measured in currency or accolades. Every missed opportunity, every delayed word, every neglected connection was a reminder that the price of postponement is far higher than the discomfort of facing reality. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat quietly in my study, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past weeks. I thought of my daughter, now smiling and laughing more freely, a bond strengthened by presence rather than promises. I thought of Robert, whose laughter filled the air like sunlight through leaves, a reminder that even long, neglected friendships can be restored. I thought of my ex-wife resting peacefully, her eyes bright with recognition of my change, a testament to the power of showing up when it counts. And yet, even in this calm, life presented one final lesson. I received a call from my youngest nephew, a man I had scarcely known, who faced a crossroads in his own life. He was lost, unsure of choices, burdened by fear, much as I had been at his age. He asked me for guidance, not as a lecture, but as a compass, someone who had navigated regret and emerged with clarity. I realized then that life's lessons are not solitary. They are shared, passed on, and multiplied when embraced fully. I spoke to him honestly, telling him what I had learned in 52 years. Do not postpone love, do not defer honesty, and do not fear the discomfort of presence. The world is unforgiving to those who wait, but merciful to those who act. He listened intently, perhaps sensing that these were not words learned from books, but from the harsh, relentless tutelage of life itself. I felt a surge of hope, a reassurance that even the lessons I had delayed could ripple outward, touching others and preventing them from repeating my mistakes. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, I felt the profound transformation that comes from finally living as one should. My body, though aged, felt lighter. My mind, though marked by decades of error, felt clearer. My heart, though scarred, felt open. I began to understand the final truth. Life does not reward those who are cautious, nor those who wait. It rewards those who show up, who act with courage, honesty, and love, no matter how late the hour. When my ex-wife passed, peacefully and surrounded by those who mattered, I felt not sorrow alone, but gratitude. Gratitude that I had finally arrived at understanding, gratitude for the opportunity to reconcile, to embrace, to act. Her death, inevitable as it was, became not a symbol of loss, but a confirmation that I had finally learned to live fully. The decades of delay had not been wasted entirely. They had prepared me for this moment, had sharpened my resolve, and had illuminated the path forward for the years that remained. I began to write my reflections, documenting lessons, memories, and truths for anyone willing to listen. Each page was a testament to the value of presence, the necessity of honesty, and the power of love. I wrote not for fame nor recognition, but as a guidepost for those who might still have time, those who might still learn before the hourglass empties. My story, once burdened with regret, became a beacon, a map for navigating the treacherous terrain of postponed life lessons. And in the quiet of my study, as the sun rose on yet another day, I understood the ultimate lesson. It is never too late to begin. No matter the years squandered, the mistakes made, or the opportunities missed, life offers redemption to those who act, courage to those who persist, and wisdom to those who pay attention. 52 years had taught me this. Time waits for no one, but those who embrace its fleeting nature can live more in a single day than many do in a lifetime. I am 73 now. I have spent decades learning, decades failing, decades regretting. And yet for the first time I feel unburdened, alive in a way I never have before. The past no longer weighs me down, for I have finally shown up. I have finally acted. I have finally loved, forgiven, and embraced life in all its chaos and beauty. So here is my message to anyone listening. Do not wait, do not defer life. The lessons you fear, the truths you avoid, and the actions you postpone. Confront them now, show up fully, love fiercely, speak honestly, and act without delay. Regret is heavy, time is fleeting, and life is unforgiving. But in action, presence, and courage, you will find freedom, meaning, and the chance to live as you were always meant to. Because when the years finally catch up, when the sun sets on your life, the only thing you will remember is whether you showed up, whether you loved, whether you lived, and in that moment, nothing else will matter. I spent 52 years learning this. Don't waste yours.